So let's try Luke again. Deist from Canada who wants to talk about the resurrection of Jesus.
Is it better now?
Oh, we can hear you, Luke.
Yes.
All right,
Hello.
welcome.
Yeah, the guy at the holding told me that there was something about my microphone. I'm sorry about that. So yeah, I heard you well, correctly the way before, and the reason I called was because of the question that was in the chat. Well, does it matter that Jesus resurrected? That was the question that was in the YouTube chat.
Yeah. So I see that you're a theist. Should we assume that you are a Christian?
Yeah. Who's that? That's Scott, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hi, Scott. We talked, Richard and me. I think we already talked before. So I'm a Catholic, and so I'm a theist, and yes, it does matter. I would have been Catholic.
So why does it matter? Why does that make a difference? I mean, I can understand why it might affect your, the depth or the breadth of your religious belief, but why does it matter in general, like to the world?
So resurrection is what allows us to know that God won against death. So, the reason why Jesus died and resurrected is because of our sins, right? So to signify this victory against sin, we need this resurrection. If it was death and no resurrection, we would have something missing, a show of victory, something that proves that death is not the end. You understand?
I get. So it's like a kind of a victory lap kind of thing, or maybe like a cosmic flexing, right? Just saying, look at what I can do kind of thing.
More like a score. And when you have like I hit the middle of the in the cible en français. I don't know how to say that in English. I don't remember the word now. But you fly an arrow right in the middle of the, what's the thing that you fly the arrow to? Anyway.
Not sure.
You have to have a way to measure that you indeed did what you do.
Okay, so it's kind of like a fulfillment of big talk that came a little bit earlier, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So Jesus said, I'm going to win against sin. This is why I die. And because I'm going to win, sin will not win. And I will take all of your sins and win against them.
Sure.
And that's how you know that he won. If he didn't persecute, you wouldn't know.
Let's cut to the chase here. I'm going to ask you if you have any good reason to believe that this resurrection actually happened. And I already, we kind of already showed our hands a little bit earlier. I'm going to ask you, how do you know that it's more likely that it actually happened than the stories are just wrong? And so, what are your thoughts on that?
You have the reason why I believe it is the case is because every time I have this conversation with people who don't believe it is the case, they are presenting me what it could be, right? They are claiming that it is more likely that this was what happened. For example, you said psychology explained that people will do that in that way, and this is more likely to be the case. I'm like, no, it doesn't make it more likely. Every aspect is explainable by psychology is a claim that is unfalsifiable. Right now, there is nothing that could falsify the fact.
Why is it less likely? Why is it less likely that somebody who has that psychology, which has explained these things, these are real world examples. For example, one of the things that I've kind of applied to this criteria is the study of memory. These are real applicable things. It's the study of memory. It's not just talking to people like the old idea of psychology is. Psychology these days takes in a lot of neuroscience as well. It's not just a case of talking through stuff like it used to be. They take into account neuroscience. They look at how the brain actually functions and operates. And in memory studies, a consistent They are consistent. One of the kind of heavyweights of memory studies is Elizabeth Loftus. She has done so much work in this field of memory study. Her student was herself gone on to become a massively prominent psychologist in the field of memory study, Julia Shaw. She works with police departments. She works with police departments so that they can kind of cater their interviewing techniques so they're not falsely implementing memories into people. This isn't just stuff that's unfalsifiable. This is stuff which is both works, we know we can correlate it to the actual way the brain works through kind of neuroscience, and it is stuff which is applied on the ground in lots of different fields. So it's not just a case of saying, no, well, psychology disproves the resurrection, and I accept it. This stuff works. It works again and again and again. And when we apply those fields of study, those experiments, we can see that people in traumatic situations, for example, people who suffer traumatic things are likely to misremember. So if we are taking the gospel writers as eyewitnesses, even if we just accept that they're eyewitnesses and don't even have the conversation about that they might not be, then we can apply this psychological kind of methodology to it, and we can see that, well, if they were in that situation and they've suffered a traumatic experience, they are likely to misremember. There is so many studies done on the ground. There was a study done, I think it was by Elizabeth Loftus and her team and a couple of other psychologists, where they actually studied the aftermath of a train crash. I think it was a subway crash in New York. And everybody there who witnessed it, all of the eyewitnesses who they were talked to were themselves professionals in their field. There were people who worked on the trains every day. There were police officers who were used to doing this sort of stuff, who, taking in this information. And they found that it was a traumatic event, and they found that they misremembered. They found that they had misremembered it. We've got other aspects like, for example, lots of people witnessing the same thing. Theists will often argue that that's evidence that this is true. This adds weight to the evidence that this is true. And once more, in psychological studies, again and again, we find that multiple eyewitnesses aren't necessarily better. It's not the case that they're necessarily better. So it's not just a case of saying, well, psychology is unfalsifiable and this is more likely, because what we've got is a claim that somebody has risen from the dead. We have never had one single in the history of medical science, we have not had one single confirmed case of people coming back from legal death. Whereas when we've got these psychological studies, we've got time and time and time again, this stuff has been verified, it's been put into practice, and we know that this is true. So just on that basis alone, taking out anything else from it, I don't see how you can possibly say it's more likely that Jesus rose from the dead than these psychological studies are talking, have got it right. Because these psychological studies have got it right. This has been found time and time again, and we've never had an example of someone coming back from legal death. How do you make that connection that it is more likely that Jesus rose from the dead, that this is a cognitive mistake made by people? Explain your reasoning. Talk through your reasoning to me.
And I want to, before you do that though, Luke, I just want to sharpen a point that Richard was making. I'm going to stand on the shoulders of this particular giant here by me, Richard Gilliver. There's probably a Gilliver's Travels joke in there, but I'm going to stand on the giant shoulders of Richard. And so what he was saying is that we know that some of these phenomena are possible. We have there's a long recorded history and scientific investigation of these different types, people misremembering things, people adopting other people's memories, people being influenced by strongly held beliefs that were, from beforehand and that kind of thing. So we know that these kind of things can happen. And so when you say that we're saying that psychology proves that the resurrection didn't happen. No, that's not what we're saying. We're not saying psychology proves the resurrection didn't or can't happen. What we're saying is we have an explanation for this story. We know that the kind of things that happen in our explanation can happen. Now, what I want to ask you is, do you have any reason to believe that, or any reason that we should believe that the explanation that it really was a resurrection is more likely? By saying that our explanation is extremely unlikely, the quote that I read earlier from a Facebook poster was saying that it even goes so far as to saying it's impossible, which I think is obviously ridiculous because we know these things can happen. How is it more likely that the resurrection actually happened is a better explanation, because we don't even know if that's even possible. We know these psychological phenomena are possible. We know that they happen fairly frequently. Okay. And even in the case of people that have religious belief, they would also agree that religious beliefs that other people have are also wrong. So you would agree, I would think, please correct me if I'm wrong, that people can make strongly held religious beliefs, can make statements based on those beliefs and be wrong about them. So given the fact that we know the story could be wrong, how can you come to the conclusion that it's more likely, a better explanation, that the resurrection actually happened? And to do that, you can't knock down our side. You can do that all you want. You're not going to be able to prove it's impossible because we have hard evidence that it's possible. So what you need to do is take your side of the argument there and raise it up. Do you have any way that you can do that? And I'll stop talking here and give you a chance to respond.
Luke, are you there?
Are you with us, Luke?
Yes, I am still here. So
okay.
The point that Richard pointed out, it goes with the claim that I made, which was the reason why I'm pointing it out is because your claim, they misremembered what happened, is an unfalsifiable claim. There are other claims, like Scott, you asked me, that could go towards it being more likely than not. The resurrection being more likely to be true than not more likely. But the main reason why I am seeing this in this conversation is that all the claims that I receive from the atheist side, they are unfalsifiable. There is no way to falsify their position. Right now, there's nothing that
you'd cover a lot of ground in doing that by proving the resurrection occurred.
There is no way for me to give you evidence of something that will falsify the claim or the claim that you made. So misremembrance, that word having trouble with it. The fact that we cannot remember correctly things, it will always be there. There is no way to say, we have the proof that they remembered correctly the resurrection. There is nothing. Well,
just because you can't prove what Richard said was wrong doesn't mean it's unfalsifiable.
Yeah,
that just means that you can't falsify it.
We cannot interview the people who witnessed the resurrection. We don't have direct access to them. But what we can do is we can take what we do know from psychology, the things that we do know the human brain does, and we can apply it after the fact to these resurrection accounts. And we can say, is it possible that in this situation, this person misremembered? Well, yes, we can. If we apply that psychology to that, we can do that. We can say, for want of not being able to interview the person directly, we can look at the evidence that we do have, the testimony that we do have in the gospel, and apply it to that. And can we say, is it possible that after a traumatic event, this person misremembered what they have since related and is now in the gospel? And the answer is yes. We can. It is possible that occurred. As Scott said, this doesn't prove the resurrection didn't happen, but what it does do is it gives us a good argument to say that account of the resurrection is not reliable. We can say for a fact that account is not reliable. So if that is not reliable, let's put that aside as evidence for the resurrection. And I'm not saying you're doing this, but many, many theists do use the gospel accounts as evidence for the resurrection. Let's put that aside and let's say, right, that's not evidence for the resurrection. What else is there? What else have we got? What is evidence for the resurrection?
Yeah. What would constitute evidence for it? You say memory is not evidence because we can have false memory, and we have evidence that the brain does create false memory.
That's not what he said.
Correctly what you said.
That's not what he said.
Okay.
What he said was, what the psychology tells us is that we have a possibility. We at least have a possibility that this could explain the stories, that that these psychological phenomena, misremembered memories, etc. We know that this is possible. We have evidence that we have clinical evidence that this kind of thing can happen. Okay. And so
are you sure you're talking about
what we're saying is
that were there 2,000 years ago?
Say that again.
Are you sure you're talking about brain of people that were there 2,000 years ago? Your evidence, is it based on things that happened 2,000 years ago, or is it based on things that happened 100 years ago?
We're assuming that the psychology of a human being is roughly the same. Do you think that's an unreasonable assumption?
Correct.
If you think that's an unreasonable assumption, then your entire thought process goes out the window, because then we have no way of interpreting what those people wrote. If we can't come to grips, if we can't accept there is at least some basis of common psychology, we have no way of addressing what they've said. Now, if that's your claim, then you're off in the chaos. You're off floating in the ether with no argument for anything. You can't make an argument towards anything based off of that, because you're admitting, oh, there's no way of us knowing. So if you're saying that it's unreasonable for us to make assumptions about the psychology of people 2,000 years ago, you are severely undercutting anything in the Bible. Is that your intention?
So right now, Scott, the trouble I'm having is about this specific claim about an event that happened and how we misremember an event that happened. It is not a claim about other kind of psychology behavior that happens 2,000 years ago. I'm talking about this specific one. Okay. Do you understand the difference?
So what's the difference between this specific claim about misremembering and other psychological fields and other psychological aspects? Why do you think, if you think this, why do you think that might be different from between us and people living 2,000 years ago, whereas other aspects of psychology might not be different between us and people who lived 2,000 years ago?
Okay. So, for example, somebody who is claiming something that they remember and they remember it false, in 2,000 years from now, in the place of Jesus, they were possible to death. The lie or the misremembering has a consequence of death at the time.
How do you think that affects what you're saying? If they were being threatened with death, now you're saying that we can't know anything about the psychology of these people. So what does adding the threat of death to anything? How does that affect anything that you're saying? Because now you can't say, well, they would be honest because they didn't want to die. There you're making assumptions about psychology.
Wait, Scott, I'm sorry, but when I asked, do we agree that it is about the specific case and not in general? And then in your question right now, you you said something about psychology in general, I feel we are not on the same page right now.
But we have to talk about psychology in general, because when we're talking about, you've just brought another aspect of psychology into it, because you didn't talk about memory. What you said was, well, if people believe something and they might be killed for that belief, that's going into a different area of psychology. So you can't bring a different area of psychology into it and then expect us not to talk about different areas of psychology and insist we only talk about this one. So are we talking about the memory of people 2,000 years ago, or are we talking about a wider psychological perspective from 2,000 years ago?
Unless you have a reason to think that people back then were different in one way and not different in another way, which I'm guessing might be difficult to a case to make there.
That's what I talked to you. That is the point, Scott. I think that was Scott who intervened at the end. So the point I'm making is that they have similar points that we do in psychology today, but they have a different point. One of those points is about the claim that they make based on memory. Right now, today, or 100 years from now, when you have a false claim about memory, there is no death involved. When you claim, I remember seeing that guy, that place,
why isn't there?
That thing.
Why isn't there? So you're suggesting perhaps that in certain countries where let's use Islam as an example, because we can use Islam for both sides of this argument. In some countries, Muslims have been absolutely horrendously persecuted for being Muslim. And, they are under fear of death from that. In other countries, Muslims are horrendously persecuting other people, and those people are under fear of death. Are you suggesting that those people somehow, which is the same situation you're alluding to from 2,000 years ago with the Christians, are you suggesting that those people, the way memory works is somehow different in those people who've been persecuted by Muslims, or those Muslims who have been persecuted by other people? Memory works different in them because of that persecution to how it does to people who are not being persecuted now? And if so, where are the studies that show this? Because that would be an absolutely fascinating field. Any psychologist would be all over that. If they thought, well, people being persecuted, people believing something to be true and being persecuted for that belief, that alters how we remember things. I can tell you now, psychologists would be all over that. Where is that work? Where are those papers, Luke?
All right. So I cannot give you any papers right now. We are VC during the post call. What I have to underline here, that there is a difference between an idea and an event. Right now, you chose the Muslims that are defending an idea, and they are persecuted because of an idea, not an event. Those two things are different. Do you understand the difference between those two?
You're saying that it's an event. That doesn't make it an event. We're talking about the idea of the event. We're talking about other explanations for the story. Okay, we agree that there's a story about a resurrection. We don't agree that there was a resurrection. That's the conclusion, not what we're talking. What we're talking about is the explanation of the story. What Richard has pointed out is that we have reason to believe that humans, at least recent humans, could support such a story, even if it's not true. If you're talking about death, we have lots of situations where people have died for things that turned out to be false. Okay, really the only thing that would motivate somebody there is if they believe it to be true. Okay, and they can be false in their beliefs. Their beliefs could be wrong. Okay, and so what we're saying is that we have reason to believe that that a story like that could come about due to the people telling the story being wrong, whether it be intentional, whether it be accidental, or whatever. Okay, we know that could happen at least today. We are making the assumption that we can make reasonable conclusions about the psychology, about the psychological makeup of people back then. We can assume that they can roughly do the same things that we do. And there are reasons that we can believe that. We have, some evidence that shows that the people, 2,000 years ago were not significantly different than the way we are today. And so we're saying that this is at least a possible outcome. This is a possible explanation for the story, not for any actual event. Okay. And so what you're saying is what makes most sense for the explanation of the story is that there was an actual event that occurred. Now, if our position is unfalsifiable, then obviously then your side would be unfalsifiable as well. Okay, we don't have any direct evidence of the psychology of the people that told this story. We also don't have any direct evidence of any resurrection.
Okay, what could be evidence for? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. Go. So were you going to ask what could be What could be evidence of a resurrection?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the main question. What we convince you that Jesus resurrected is the main question I ask atheists. And
so what you're saying then is that you don't have any evidence, and this is why. Explaining why you don't have evidence is not the same as saying you don't need evidence. If you can't think of a way to come up with evidence, then that just explains to us why you don't have any evidence. And we're running up against the end of the show here. I want to give you the last word, Luke. Go ahead. Please go ahead and say what your last comments on this.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott. So, yeah, the question, what would you need to observe so that you are proven false in your claim, is the question I ask many atheists. People say, I don't need that. You need to prove your point, and I will observe your arguments and destroy your arguments, and that's it. I will not question my position. I will not question my claim. If you try to question my claim, I will bash you on. I will make fun of you. This is what you do with the picture that you chose behind you in your live stream. Right now, you are making fun of the Jesus on the cross. You are using Jesus a bra. Thank you very much to allow me to finish. Luke, you are using Jesus wearing a bra, which is a mockery tool, right?
Luke, I've muted you because I was trying to interject and you didn't seem to be listening. So just bear with me a minute. During the conversation, ignore the picture of Jesus behind us. During the conversation, you said that when you talk to atheists about this, when you ask them for their claims and they give you, instead of giving you their claims and defending their claims, what they do is they start mocking you. What I've done and what Scott did before we took the call was explain our position. What I've done during this is try to defend that position. I've not stopped defending that position and started mocking you instead. So I don't know who these people are you're referring to when you say, when I talk to atheists, but it's not us. Please talk to us. We are getting really up to the end of the show. I'm going to unmute you just to say your last little bit, and then, we'll say our goodbyes. You are unmuted, Luke.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so I am not saying that you were mocking me. The thing is, as long as I'm talking to you, I have this picture under my nose, the picture of Jesus wearing a bra. When you talk to me, this is what I see every time that you talk to me. Do you understand?
So what has that got to do with what we're saying to you?
Okay, when I say that people use mockery, it's because every time you say the thing that you say are with this image of Jesus wearing a bra. All the explanation that you gave are accompanied with something that I consider mockery, something that is a mockery towards every Christian or everybody who believes that this really happened. And that's why I say this is what most atheists do. I'm not saying that this is what you did during this call. Be careful about that. I agree with you. You weren't mocking me at all. I haven't had the chance to talk much, but thank you very much for giving me this end of this last word. So to finish my thoughts, there was just reading about this addressed. There was this this claim that you pointed out, which is psychology, and I pointed out how the brain doesn't work the same way because the context that people were 2,000 years ago is not the same context that happened. That was when the study that you cited were made. The psychology study that you cited were made. The context is different. People were afraid to die at the time when they misremembered events. It's really important to make the difference between idea and event, because when I ask the question to people in general, not you, but to people, what was the event that caused other people to die? So they would present to the situation, either you say this didn't happen or you die, and they choose to die instead of saying this didn't happen. So we
okay, I'm sorry, Luke. I'm going to have to break in here. We do have to wrap up the show. I apologize for cutting you off there. I hope that you feel comfortable and that you were at least able to get out what you're saying. I appreciate your call, and I wish we would have been able to get your call earlier. You know, there's lots there for us to dig into, and I would welcome another call from you in the future. And if you want to come to the after show, we can continue our chat there.